Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Anne Livingston, and I'm chair of the Community Care Smart Assistive Technology Collaborative. I'm pleased to be the moderator for today's webinar. The focus of our webinar today is the Autism Spectrum Australia's Tele-Therapy for Children project. Our webinar today is facilitated by Global Community Resourcing for the Community Care Smart Assistive Technology Collaborative. Many of you online today have worked with us or collaborated with us through the Community Care Smart Assistive Technology Collaborative and would know that we've been engaged with some seed funding from the Queensland Government to provide an online platform for community providers, researchers, developers, and families and individuals to come together and talk about issues about where smart assistive technology can help in service delivery. We use our extensive international linkages through this project, and I thank many of those international projects and research entities for being involved in the collaborative. If you've joined us in previous webinars, you'll know that they are designed from feedback and requests we receive through the collaborative. The focus of our webinars is really to bring together the local, national and international perspectives in research and development, as well as in the practical deployment of smart assistive technology in the community care sector. Just a reminder, if you haven't formally registered at the collaborative site, it's accessible to all and free to register, so just visit us at www.satcommunity.com.au and you can register easily by doing that. Just by way of a disclaimer, we need to note that Global Community Resourcing is not promoting or endorsing any particular product, research entity or organisation. Rather, the purpose of our webinars is really to serve to inform viewers of the various smart, assistive and enabling technologies currently in development or in practical deployment, such as this project. Just a reminder, we really welcome questions. In the interests of the recording of this program, your microphones have been muted, but you can add any questions at any time, and we'd encourage you to add them as they come to your mind in the dashboard at the right of your screen. It's really easy just to use a question. We can moderate those questions as the presenter is speaking, and the earlier you get your questions in, the more chance we've got to discuss these with the presenter today. You can see that control panel on the right. Many of you on board today are experienced users of our GoToMeeting platform. To ask a question, you just contribute to the chat pane and click chat and type your message. In this webinar, it's really my pleasure to introduce Genevieve Johnsson, who's a psychologist and a practice leader in innovation for the Autism Spectrum Australia. She's going to present today on her project, Tele-Therapy for Children. This project is aimed at establishing a cooperative and collaborative model of tele-therapy for children on the autism spectrum, and particularly those who live in regional, rural and remote Australia. It's a great pleasure to have you on board today, Genevieve, and thank you very much. We'll change over to your screen. Thank you, Genevieve.
Thanks, Anne. Before we start, so we're all joining in today from different parts of our beautiful country, Australia, and internationally. So before I start, I'd like to pay my respect and acknowledge the Darug people, who are the traditional custodians of the land in which I'm delivering this webinar today, and also the custodians of the lands in which you are joining me today. I pay my respect to elders, both past and present, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal present today. So thank you, Anne, for my introduction. So yes, I'm a psychologist and practice leader with Autism Spectrum Australia. So we have been in the telepractice space since July 2015. So I've just completed a PhD on telepractice for supporting and training and consultation for rural and remote practitioners supporting children and adults on autism spectrum. So I've been doing this for a little while, and today I'm going to be talking about our Tele-Therapy pilot. So you've got a bit of a blurb there. So we're going to go through all about the Tele-Therapy pilot, but what's most important is what we've learned so far about telepractice, the delivery of telepractice, and as an organisation, how we can implement that through best practice. So what we know so far, so I thought I'd kind of do a little bit of a background on what's happening in terms of policy and what is known about telepractice. So we do know that coming through with the disability workforce sector reports that we do have persistent shortages in allied health services. So getting these allied health services, especially out into rural and remote areas, has been difficult. The Productivity Commission at the start did say we needed to triple our workforce to meet demands, especially in rural areas. So we know there's huge need there to get services out to these areas. The NDIS had a rural and remote strategy report, and one of the suggestions was leveraging off the high demand and success of telehealth, so as a way to kind of bridge that gap. So we know that the NDIA has seen telepractice as the way forward for a lot of services that can get too hard to reach areas. And I guess we've already know that the Department of Health through Medicare has the Better Access to Telehealth program for mental health services. And so we know that the changes that have happened so far, at the start we saw telehealth services needing to incorporate that face-to-face percentage, so 4 sessions needed to be face-to-face. And then September 2018, we saw those that restriction lifted, and so we saw that all telehealth sessions for mental health services could be delivered online without face-to-face. However, what we want to know is what is the optimal ratio of face-to-face services and online services. Is a purely telehealth model? Can we see the impact and can we see success through a purely telehealth model? So this is where I'm really excited to be a part of this research, a part of this group of individuals who are looking into telepractice and how we can service people in the remote areas where there is nothing, especially in the autism specific world. And so that's where we've come from and where we're looking to go. So in terms of the evidence behind telepractice for individuals on the autism spectrum, there's been 2 systematic reviews done so far. So we had one in 2010 with 8 studies, and then we had 14 additional studies in 2018. And so what we're seeing is that everyone are using off-the-shelf video conferencing. So things like Skype, Adobe Connect, so a lot of really basic, simple video conferencing. A lot of the limitations in the studies so far has been about sample sizes. So it's been very small sample sizes. We're seeing not many with control groups and a few with randomization. And I guess that's where I'm really interested in understanding the importance of face-to-face, understanding the difference between telehealth and face-to-face. So we also want to know, the research was lacking in things like generalization of the intervention and maintenance over time. So a lot of the studies didn't have that follow-up period to it. And so I guess overall, looking at these systematic reviews, we see that it is indeed a promising model of support. And so moving forward, we kind of think, okay, let's have a look at the cost and benefit behind it. Now we know that in a lot of rural and remote areas, we don't have the allied health professionals. So, back in 2015, before we even started to look at NDIS in rural and remote areas where we were working in New South Wales, we might have had one OT servicing a vast area of Western New South Wales. So a huge area was one OT. And so we know that that's, we're not seeing those staff out there. And so the travel, the burden of travel, the stress that it can put on that one staff member is quite significant. And so if we're looking at a cost analysis, so one study was done very recently about the cost benefit of a telehealth model. And we can see that, I mean, the figures are right in front of you. It was a 12-week telehealth intervention, 18 families for kids on the spectrum, aged 2 to 6 years. And we see that huge, it's 34% the telehealth program, but they reported that they were successful, the program was successful across all 3 conditions. So it was successful in increasing parent efficacy and child participation. And so we see a massive benefit to telehealth practice in terms of cost. Now, what's come out of the research so far is a number of needs that we need to look at for our research and understanding of telepractice. So we have a huge country in Australia. It's very geographically spread. So we need to not only work out, okay, does this telehealth program work? We need to understand what is it about this program that works for who and in what context. So this kind of realistic evaluation framework helps to guide the development and delivery of telehealth services, not just at the individual level, but also at an organisational as well as a policy level. So we need to understand the barriers that exist in Australia for effective telehealth service delivery. We need to understand what the barriers are for the individuals on the autism spectrum and their support networks. We also need to understand what the limitations are for telepractice. So we have in Aspect Therapy, we have a multidisciplinary team. So we have social workers, psychologists, OT, occupational therapists, speech pathologists, and so we need to, and special educators as well. And so we need to understand, are there any limitations in terms of discipline-specific limitations? So what we wanted to do is we wanted to understand whether telepractice can indeed become practice as usual for many of our isolated clients. And that's what I talk to our staff a lot about, is that when we deliver services, and a lot of services we deliver in Aspect Therapy, so we in homes. So our services are in natural environments, so in families' homes, we're in preschools, we're in schools, we're in group homes, we're out in the community, we're at the shops with our clients. So our therapy is happening with the clients in vivo. So we need to look at teletherapy as literally another dot point on our list of places that we service. We need to understand how we can make sure that it is the same as a face-to-face service. So in 2017, we were awarded funding by NDS for the Innovative Workforce Funding, Innovative Workforce Fund. So the purpose of this study was to support the rural and remote disability sector as the NDIS rolled out in these regions. So the region we were looking at specifically, the NDIS came in from July 2017. So what we wanted to look at is how we could expand the availability of autism-specific disability workforce support in rural and remote Australia, where these services may be limited or non-existent. So we have the potential here to provide a low-cost and timely service in all of these areas using technology. So what we wanted to know is we wanted to examine and understand the efficacy and acceptability of a collaborative autism-specific service delivered to rural and remote clients via video conferencing technology. We call that teletherapy. So our project report is there. It will be in the slides. We've just had our project report accepted into the journal, Rural and Remote Health Journal, so that will be available as well. So our teletherapy pilot, as I said, it ran from September 2017 to May 2018. So a nice short cohort that we had coming through. So we designed the service around what we may start to see within our time limit frame. So we need to have that goal setting session. Then within the time frame, we looked at 6 teletherapy sessions. So these were delivered in the participants' natural environment. It was either home, school or preschool. It was all done via Zoom. Now we were at Aspect, we're very focused on collaboration in our services and having all of the people around the individual on board with what's going on. And so the service was targeted to the participant, but also their family and their local support team. So what we wanted to know, we wanted to look at the goals. So we wanted to understand what the goals were and wanted to see if we could have change in those goals over a short period of time. We wanted to understand whether quality of life changed. So we know that some of the people that we were potentially going to recruit had not had any services to date. They might have been too remote to have any face-to-face services or any services at all. So we wanted to know whether there was any changes in quality of life for being able to access that support. We wanted to know whether people were happy with our project. It's always helpful when people actually enjoy the project and the service and find that it was helpful. And then we did interviews as well. So this is where we got a lot of our really rich data. We did 22 interviews with parents, with local educators, allied health specialists, and also our teletherapists as well. So we wanted to know, in terms of the limitations, where did they see the limitations in their job and what they were trying to do as compared to a face-to-face service. So our project was in New South Wales. So we recruited and trained a multidisciplinary team. So we had a speech pathologist, occupational therapist, psychologist, and special educator who are all working on this project. So as you can see from my maps there, they were very far apart. So we made sure that we understood how we could deliver this service from different parts of our state as well. Then we had 16 children. So we recruited 16 children aged 2 to 12 years to receive the teletherapy service. The orange dot sitting off to the right is actually Lord Howe Island. It's not one that has gone astray there. So we had a client on Lord Howe Island, and then all the other participants were across lots of different areas. We used Zoom for our video conferencing technology. So as we looked in the research, most were using off-the-shelf technology, and so we felt that that would be most useful. A lot of the work that we've done before has been on another platform, on Adobe Connect, but we found that moving on to Zoom has been easier for families and easier for our staff as well. And so as we talked about, we had a number of different goals. So in our first session that we had with families, we focused on goal development, as we do with all of our face-to-face families. We used the online video conferencing to interview families, to interview the staff around families. So we really encouraged the local support team, so the educators and the allied health staff, to be a part of this goal setting time. So whether that's through email feedback, the beauty of Zoom and video conferencing is that even if they're not with us, they can log in from their phone. So we might find that a therapist and a speech pathologist who is supporting this client on the autism spectrum in this area may not be able to attend in person, but can jump online and see what we're doing and join in with the discussion. And so that's been one of the great things, is that being able to have that collaboration. And so goals were set at the start of the program. And so we did find a huge range of target areas. We did have a multidisciplinary team. And while we do work in discipline-specific intervention, a lot of our therapists work in a transdisciplinary model, which means that we might have a speech pathologist who is also working on behaviour support. So we might do a lot of more, we have a lot of our staff who are trained on behaviour support. And so what we found is behaviour support was one of the most common goals, the most popular goals in our program. This wasn't surprising, because we know from a lot of the reports that behaviour support is something that is in need in regional and remote areas, and you do need specialised skills and experience to be able to support individuals on the autism spectrum with behaviours of concern. With the NDIS Quality and Safeguards Commission, with a lot more of the capability framework, this is more important than ever. So positive behaviour support. We also have other goals, so self-care goals, emotion and sensory regulation, increasing teachers' understanding of autism and confidence in supporting the client. So this is where some goals changed. It wasn't just about, goals for the individual on the spectrum. It was also goals around building capacity in the local staff. And so we saw that as probably one of the most important goals as part of our program. So we know over the years, we know that it's not just doing therapy to, it's doing therapy with. And so that's about with everyone in that individual's life. And so we find that a lot of our teletherapy work is around coaching and increasing understanding and building capacity around everyone around that child to be able to support long after we're gone. And so we know that this is even face-to-face as well. We know that best practice is to build skills in everyone to implement the strategies after we go. And so we used those and we included those goals as part of our program, increasing teachers' understanding. And you can see a few down there. It's also increasing parents' understanding of autism. And so we used rating scales to be able to understand where teachers and where families were at in terms of their understanding of autism. We used that at the before and after. Other things, social skills, grammar and story writing, early play. So a very broad range of goals that we did look at in this program. So what we found in our GAS outcomes, so it was a short period of time, 7-8 months that we were seeing our clients, and it was really positive to see when we did go through the GAS, when I did go through the GAS with the families at the end, that we did see a good deal of change for a lot of families. And a lot of our participants saw expected change or more than expected change. And that was a really positive thing to see. When looking at the quality of life, it was a very short period. And so we did see change, but not a great amount of change. So this is one of those measures that we might see more long term. And so but we didn't see anything going the other way, which not too bad the other way. But yeah, it was good to see that was maintaining that quality of life. And we did have good program satisfaction. So families are asked questions like, I found the process for logging on to Zoom simple and easy to do. So we needed to understand, are we using the right technology? Is this nice and easy? Previously, when we've used different technology, this number has been very different for us. So that's why we moved to different technology. So knowing your technology is super important for making sure that you're going to have an acceptable product going out there. Audio quality, video quality was great. And then technology is a successful way to connect with specialist disability services. So this was all really positive for our service. Ultimately, when we're looking at this project, we need to understand and put forward a business model, a case model to say, this is a way that is going to help connect, but we needed to see, is it actually helping? We know that this is a way to connect, but is it actually helping the people on the ground? So that was really positive as well. So what is it about this program that worked? Collaborating with local services. This came through in almost all interviews that we conducted with families, and also informally through emails, through our teletherapy staff, just saying, wow, you know, this is so nice to get everyone on the same page. So families have been trying for so long to be able to get into schools and to talk to schools. So it was really nice having the teletherapists come in and being able to get everyone together, get everyone on the same page. When interviewing a speech pathologist, we did find that they saw that as peer supervision. So as I said before, we have very isolated allied health staff out there because they might be the only one in a very broad area. So having that other speech pathologist there is like a peer supervision model as well. And so it's really nice that a speech pathologist could support the work that a speech pathologist is doing in there already. So collaboration, we feel it's a big part of what we do anyway, but in terms of telepractice, we think is vital, because families and local support networks are not getting that autism specific support. And so making sure that everyone is having that opportunity to build capacity and understand and get those skills to support people on the autism spectrum is very important, not just for this individual client, but for future clients as well. So individualized autism specific support. So we did have a lot of comments about in our interviews about, you know, I thought I knew autism, I actually didn't know autism. So when we went back and did that GAS rating with one family, they said, well, I rated myself at this, but now that I've been working with Aspect or with the teletherapist, I realized that I was down here and I've made these steps. So that autism-specific support, we know that in rural and remote areas, a lot of our allied health staff are generalists, which means that they will be seeing a broad range of case presentations and clients, and this means that they have skills across a broad range of areas. Having an autism-specific allied health therapist come in and provide that knowledge, and this is their area of expertise, can really be a light bulb moment for a lot of families and a lot of local support networks, because it is that understanding from having experienced that for so long to see why a child might be doing specific behaviours, or how we can use best practice with this population to be able to build those different skills. So individualised and autism-specific support was something that came through as a theme within this project that is absolutely needed and absolutely needs to be ongoing to build that capacity. Another thing that we saw that came through was that it improved access to specialist support. And so we see this quote here: we have learning and support assistant principals who come and support us when we don't know what to do, but her knowledge, her therapist knowledge and understanding were just so far above anything we've seen before. So again, we're looking at when a specialist has experience, skills, so many different tools in their toolkit for supporting someone who is in a specialist support group, that can really add to a local support teams network. So you know, we're seeing that, okay, autism specific, that's what really worked about this program and that collaboration. In terms of our workforce development, so our workforce, the funding that we had was to understand how we could develop a competent and confident teletherapy workforce to meet the needs of rural and remote participants. Now, what we found is when we first started this program, so teletherapy, we've done a lot of telepractice, so training and support, and a lot of one-on-one consultation over video conferencing. So teletherapy was launched and launched with this funded project. So what we found is we recruited our teletherapists. We had varying levels of technology understanding and experience, setting up the service, understanding the service, pretty much just changing your role as a psychologist. I'm a psychologist, understanding how my role translates online. So these are things that every therapist needs to think about. And so what we found at the start is we had a lot of admin hours, and we're a bit alarmed at the start because we were like, oh wow, how is this sustainable under an NDIS model? But over time, these definitely decreased as all of our tech skills increased. Now, what we found with face-to-face, so we had a lot of our teletherapists and a lot of our, also our families as well, talking about a mix of face-to-face, how our therapists felt about delivering over teletherapy. We had a real mixed response. So we had, you know, some staff saying, one of our staff members saying, you got that country town feel. I felt like I was there with them. Another person was like, you know, I got to see around the setting. They gave me a bit of a tour of the school and showed me in the classroom. I felt like I could really see and make some practical suggestions based on what I was seeing rather than what I was just being told. And this can happen a lot, not just on it with our telepractice clients, but often, you know, if people are seeing, if we're coming to see someone in a clinic, if a child is seeing someone in a clinic and a family is describing the home and what's happening, they're not seeing that. With telepractice, we have the power to be able to grab that device, get the phone, get the iPad, a bit harder with a laptop, but it can be done, it can be set up in the classroom, and then to be given that tour. And that's some of the things, like a rapport building with our staff and with the clients on the spectrum, was that they were shown around houses. I was shared videos and photos of one of our teletherapists who got a tour of the farm and all the animals on the farm. And so there's stories like this that we're seeing being woven into telepractices, which is really promising for how we can see it being able to mirror face-to-face services. So as I said, there was mixed response. So we did have a couple of therapists say that it was harder to establish rapport. It's much easier face-to-face to establish that rapport. So they did feel the difference, especially when you're doing a lot of that goal setting situation and starting to build up that relationship of working directly with that client. And so it is mixed. And it is something, a therapist going into a telepractice or a teletherapy role, it is something that we talk to staff about. You know, this is something that might be different. It's a change. It's something that you may adapt to. It's something that you may say, this is not for me. And so we need to understand, like, you know, it's the teletherapy, you know, preference for practicing as well. So what were our barriers in the service? So what we found is technology initially needs to be supported. This isn't just for teletherapists, this is across the board. Even though we went with Zoom, which is a very simple platform to deliver on and to pick up and click on and off you go, there is going to be difficulties technology-wise. So we did have to work through those. We did see the program satisfaction that, you know, we got high ratings, but still in the interviews, we did hear some things like, you know, the initial time, yeah, it did play up a bit, staff having difficulties at the staff getting on, but supporting that technology, getting through those issues was kind of vital to be able to not make that a barrier in the current program. So technology initially needs to be supported. Face-to-face is still important for certain goals. So working with our occupational therapist actually brought a lot of this up. So our occupational therapist might be working on a fine motor goal. So we might have an NDIS goal specifically for an OT that we're looking at fine motor. And so the OT was saying sometimes we might need to use physical to be able to get the hand into the correct position. So things like that, anything that needs that physical interaction, that may be difficulty with telepractice. So these are things that as an organisation, we're looking at how can we do this? How can we get through this barrier of not having that physical contact? And so we're looking at different models, so like whether they're going down the allied health assistant and training, using videos to be able to and show what it looks like for families to be able to help with that physical interaction. So understanding what those barriers are important to be able to see what goals can be addressed through telepractice and what may be limited. And as I said before, building rapport is also important with face-to-face. So there's difficulties in scheduling of sessions. So one of the things that we thought would not be a barrier because it's online, it's quite dynamic, it's we're still able to schedule in whenever we, you know, you don't need to travel or to spend 2 hours traveling to a place or a clinic or anything like that. Despite that, we still have barriers of scheduling of sessions. And so we had cancellations. So even this continues despite being face-to-face. So this is similar as what we'd see face-to-face. So I guess this always presents difficulties in the NDIS marketplace, but new policies are coming around now. This was written a little while ago. New policies are coming around now to meet the needs of organisations when we're seeing those cancellations. But I think when you have that online platform, it might be easier to just cancel a session when we're not seeing them. Oh, well, there's no travel, so it's not too bad, and I can just slot them into another time. So what are the lessons? I'm just going to go through what the lessons that we've learned over the whole project now. So we really wanted to invest and think about how we can create successful teletherapists, because we know that the program is very dependent on the teletherapist and what the program that they're delivering. So we need all of our teletherapists. And so since we've wrapped this project, we've launched all of our teletherapy services. We go through a list with all of our teletherapists to check all of these things and discuss all of these things. One of the most important things is reliable internet and technology. Obviously, we're not going to have a teletherapist who is in a remote area or who has very unreliable intermittent technology, internet, and doesn't have up-to-date technology. You know, we understand when our participants and our clients, their technology is not going so great, especially in areas that are, you know, under satellite, where the, you know, it kind of comes in and out, or, you know, Lord Howe, where a few clouds go over and we might be out for the day. But we need to have teletherapists with reliable internet and technology. So we do a lot of that testing beforehand to understand whether someone is in as a good candidate for being a teletherapist. Obviously experience. So when we're going into it, when we're going into an NDIS service, we want to be getting it right from day one. We had the luxury in our pilot project of being able to kind of feel our way through and understand the technology and work with our therapists to build those skills. But now we're hitting the fee for service. We need to make sure that, boom, we're experienced with our online video conferencing technology, and off we go. We have a lot of problems. Everyone has problems. And so I've been doing tech support for like 4 years now. But it's about be able to problem solve with families, not just yourself. So you should be pretty confident, but a teletherapy needs to be able to support families to problem solve their own technology, because there is that difficulty. Okay, well, it's not connecting. What do we need to do? So understanding how to support a family, a local support team, a school. So schools have a lot of issues with being able to, their firewalls don't let things in. So being able to problem solve with the technology to get your client, participant, local support team online. Very important is understand the issues faced in rural and remote communities if that is where the client is based. So definitely understanding what the lay of the land is like, what kind of services are available, what the family, like what is the family facing in that area? What is their travel like? Are they going to schools that are an hour away? So understanding what are the issues that are faced in areas, in rural and remote areas is very important. Flexibility in scheduling an online session. So we do, like this is face-to-face as well, but as I said, being able to schedule in the sessions that work for families and work for the therapist as well. And we know like we do want to have that collaborative approach. So being able to be very flexible and making sure we can get everyone in at the same time. Excellent collaboration. There's no guesses to that one. That's a big part of our program. Excellent coaching skills. That's one thing that came out of our teletherapy pilot is, and I said it before, it's not the therapy to, it's the therapy with. So say I'm delivering a play-based program. So I have a child who's learning early communication, social communication skills like joint attention. And we do all of that through play. I'm not there. I can't model the strategies with the child. And so I'm doing a lot of coaching for the family, for the early educator on what they're doing. So coaching is a way to be able to build someone's capacity and get them to understand, yes, I can do this, I can do that. So it puts you out of that position of I'm doing therapy to this child, whereas I'm teaching you to do it. That's been really quite refreshing for a lot of our therapists because we talk a lot about building capacity, about coaching everyone around the person to be able to implement these strategies. But sometimes our go-to is to just do it to show. But yeah, so teletherapy forces you to sit back and make the families very involved in doing that, doing bubbles on the ground with that child and then coaching. Did you see how he was looking over there? This is how you can get them to do this. So we need to see that really good coaching model in a lot of our teletherapists. This is one of the things that we really stress towards our teletherapists, the one coming in for the pilot, and also any teletherapist that comes in now, is the ability to think creatively in how face-to-face intervention strategies can be adapted to telepractice. So any training or support I give to our new teletherapists, I say the teletherapy world is your oyster. And what I'm saying is that I want you to learn and trial new things and come back and tell each other, this is what I tried and this is how it went. Every day we are learning how telepractice can be adapted to face-to-face intervention. So I'm kind of like thinking that's a big part of a teletherapy is thinking outside the box. Okay, well, typically in person, this is what I do. What would I do? How would I translate that to telepractice? So that's a big key learning and something I'm really kind of excited to continue to learn about. So organisations, this is one thing that we did as part of our IWF reporting, was to look at how organisations can become teletherapy ready. And this was really just to say, okay, this is what we've been through, and these are some things for other organisations to think about when they're going through this. Undergoing a trial. So having a think about which type of supports that you currently deliver, and they can be transferable. As I said, it's about thinking outside the box. What do we do? What does that look like on teletherapy, on telepractice? So thinking about every single thing, and does that translate to an online model? Investing in training and support. So we put a lot of time into our teletherapists now. At the start, as I said, we were learning on the go. We were teaching as we went and learning. Now we invest time in our teletherapists before they even hit the workforce, so they understand everything that I've talked about today. And I had that time one-on-one with them, practiced all of the Zoom, so that when they hit that teletherapy service, they're confident and ready to go and deliver. Need to understand the online platform that is within your budget and also suits the needs. So understanding collaboration, sharing documents. So there's some online like Skype, which might not have as good as sharing, document sharing. So understanding what your service looks like and what kind of platform would kind of map onto that to be able to deliver that support. Understanding current Australian privacy laws, making sure that these are in line when storing data. So the privacy laws actually changed mid-pilot, where we were recording sessions, and then the new privacy laws meant that we could not record sessions anymore. So we use technology that has end-to-end encryption. So it's like sitting on Zoom with a family is like talking on the phone. As soon as the information goes in, it's gone. And so there's no data stored at all. So being very aware of the Australian privacy laws with Zoom, the recordings were actually stored outside of Australia, and that's where we realised. So we had to delete everything that we had, put on USB for the families, but understanding these kind of laws, looking into it, making sure you're in line with any storing of any data. The last thing that we did was to think about is making sure you disclose the risks associated with using any online platform and making sure you declare the responsibility of each party. So obviously there is risks of doing anything online. So while we're not recording or storing data, and while our participants are not recording, they're receiving a recording, there are still ways to record a screen. So making sure you're disclosing any risk associated with using an online platform. So this is how, these are all the things that we've learned. Next up for us is that we're going to start, we're working with the University of Sydney, and we're looking at behaviour support. So that did come through our teletherapy pilot as a big area of need. It's coming from all angles, that this positive behaviour support is really something that we need to start practicing over telepractice. To be able to get that support out to those areas where it's needed, especially when we're hearing a lot of different anecdotes about school attendance issues, lots of different things. So positive behaviour support via telepractice, and also supporting the rural and remote allied health assistant workforce via teleconferencing as well. So I'm really excited to hear about all the work that's being done in telepractice and workforce development. I have a list of references that I have had a chat about today, different policies, and I think we're now going to head over to some question time. But yeah, so thanks for having a listen in today, and I hope you've got some lessons and got some information about all the things that we've learnt so far. So thank you.
Thank you very much for such a comprehensive overview of your project. We've got a number of questions online and from viewers that are in the room with us. For those who are currently on the line and haven't asked a question, now's your time, and we've got a couple of minutes if you want to add something to the chat pane now, and we'll certainly try to get to all the questions. So the first question was a comment from Josh. Genevieve, thank you, a very comprehensive webinar. Can you comment on the attitude of the workforce towards the technology?
Okay, so as in the rural and remote workforce?
No, I think reading behind the lines of Josh's question and knowing his service, and knowing that his service is predominantly women 45 years and older, where digital inclusion and digital literacy might be a barrier and might cause those workers to put up a barrier towards using technology in practice. Did you have any similar experiences to that?
Yeah, so I think there is an article published about the adoption of telehealth, and one of the findings was that age may have been a factor in adoption of telehealth and telepractice. We know that it's changing, attitudes are changing to telepractice. The only way attitudes are changing is by experiencing. And so I will just let you know that 2 of our teletherapists were in an older age bracket, and are both as strongest advocates for the product, but it is really about trialing. So it's, you know, having that successful trial of telehealth and then realizing, wow, this is something that that works, that is like not so bad as I thought. So I think that we're getting towards being able to get, you know, let go of that kind of, oh, it's not the same as face-to-face, but the only way we get there is through practice. And so that is doing a lot more things online as a team. So our team does a lot more Zoom conferencing, Zoom supervision. The more confident you get with technology, it's often like when you have a client's face on the screen in front of you and they're in, you know, somewhere remote, and you go, I feel like I'm just talking to you right now. You start to see, oh, this isn't that bad. Like I can actually see you, I can hear your voice, I can see your facial expressions. It's not as bad as I thought. So I think it is just giving it a go. I think changing those attitudes is about just, let's just try it. Not saying we have to do this, but let's just try it. I hope that answers your question, Josh, but I feel like we're moving towards a change in that, accepting it.
Thanks, Genevieve. Josh just added a couple more queries there. He'd love to have a reference point for that research you mentioned.
Yep.
And so perhaps we can talk about that offline and get that reference point for him.
Yep.
I've got another question about, did you use allied health assistance in the practice? And if you didn't, do you see a role for increased allied health assistance in rural and remote settings and settings where teletherapy is being used?
We in the pilot project, no teletherapist was linked in with any of the clients that we actually saw, but absolutely, I see that as the way forward, is having allied health assistants on the ground. So we would have loved to have linked in, but they just weren't. They weren't there in that community, and they weren't linked in. But yeah, looking at where we're going now in Aspect, and I think the disability sector is looking at that allied health assistant model and being able to connect in. So a lot of our telepractice moving on will be focused on sourcing allied health assistant. We're seeing a lot more plans with allied health assistants. So sourcing a local allied health assistant to be able to work with us, absolutely.
And that raises another question from Daphne. Those allied health assistants are also not getting training in new technologies or innovation in practice. Do you want to make some comments about that? And if you know of any activities to try to influence change in curriculum development to include that?
So training in the use of technology for delivering services? Is that?
Yeah, broadly, as we move along to more uptake of innovation, more innovative ways of delivering via technology, yet we're faced with curriculum at both levels, both allied health assistant level in the vet training and in some tertiary training fields where there's not a lot of exposure. Do you have some comments about that, or are you influencing changes?
Yeah, definitely. I've just written that down actually. So definitely this is something that we need to know now. So we're looking at a whole new project going into allied health assistant and the training and support that allied health, Cert 4, Cert 3, Cert 4 receiving, and whether that's adequate when we hit the workforce. So training in delivery via telepractice is definitely something that we should be looking at for all allied health assistants, especially in rural and remote areas, because they will be using that model. So thank you for that comment / question. That's definitely something that I'm going to be raising as well.
Thank you. You talked about the upfront need to, really train and position therapists and workers to use the technology. As part of the project, Glenn asked, did you develop any specific resources, or is that something that you're planning to do?
So in terms of training our staff, we have a webinar that we train staff with, and then it's one-on-one consultation and practice sessions. It's not something that we thought about publishing outside of Aspect, but if that's something that is of need, and it sounds like general delivery of telepractice outside might be, if I'm getting a couple of questions, we are looking at our training schedule for next year. So we have been delivering training and support for allied health staff and professionals and anyone out in rural and remote communities. So that's definitely something we can think of for delivering as well, if there's interest there.
Thank you. I've got a question from Shona. You mentioned Zoom as the preferred platform. Did you investigate other platforms as part of the project?
Yes, we did. Yeah. So we've come from Adobe Connect, and that didn't meet our needs. We looked at Skype, we looked at CoView, and we looked at Zoom. And Zoom met our needs, ticked out all the boxes. And so since then, we've become Zoom as now organisation-wide since we started this. So it was definitely the right product for us, but it's about investigating for everyone.
Thank you. I've got a question about the children themselves. Can you expand on their acceptance of telehealth delivery, or whether you were looking more from feedback from families? I guess that's a tough one at times to evaluate, isn't it?
Yeah, well, so it's something that we didn't evaluate, and in future studies we will be. So definitely the voice of the individual on the autism spectrum is something that's important. When we put in our research design on this, we did not include that, and so we couldn't collect any data from our participants. But yeah, future projects, we're absolutely looking at getting consent from our participants on the autism spectrum to be able to contribute to the discussion, because that's where we can learn even more about this. Because we did have a lot of our clients, it wasn't just capacity building for our families and our teachers, it was the individual client going through a social skills intervention with our staff. So absolutely.
And I've got another question from Rod that will, I think, finalise our questions today. Rod's asking, it's a really great, commenting that it's a really great presentation. Genevieve, thank you for making the time to share this with the collaborative. Can you indicate if the final report in its entirety can be accessed?
Yes, so I'll send through the link to the report. It's a full reflective report. So it's a lot of what I talked about today, but even more. So you'll be able to get a really good understanding of the whole project. And then the research article is actually a reflection of that report as well. So I'll definitely be able to send that link through and you can distribute that.
So thank you very much, Genevieve. A fabulous presentation, a really worthwhile project, and really hitting the mark in terms of supporting the development of innovative responses to the needs of our colleagues in rural and remote areas, but also I think adding to the landscape of those in metropolitan areas where ideally these sorts of new service types should be on the menu and the suite of service delivery. On behalf of everyone in the collaborative, I'd like to thank you for taking the time today to join us.
Thanks, Anne. Thanks everyone for having me. It's been great.
Thank you, Genevieve. So what's next in terms of the activities in the collaborative? There's a number of individuals in the collaborative who have been conferring for a number of years now on trying to address the issue of hospitalisation over the summer periods in relation to extreme weather. And we'll be doing some creative work around that. And we've been working on a number of island communities nationally. So Genevieve, it was also good to hear that you're on Lord Howe Island, because we've been doing a project around new innovative approaches to delivering services on island communities nationally and internationally with some of our international collaborators. So we look forward to talking to you about that further. Summer is coming, Surviving the Heat, as a project that is looking at how innovation can improve outcomes for vulnerable individuals during climate change. So we're holding a session on Macleay Island. For those of you who don't know where Macleay Island is, it's in the Southern Moreton Bay group of islands in the Redlands coast area, and you can register for that event at the collaborative website. We've got also about 20 other webinars that we're trying to fit in before the end of this year, and you'll find further details of those webinars as they are confirmed. Again, please get in touch with the collaborative project team at any time. They can be emailed at sat@communityresourcing.com.au. If you have any further questions, queries, or want for information from today's session, you can email us on that website. I once again like to thank the members of the collaborative research team, particularly Georgie Gould, who's facilitated in the background this session, and today's guest speaker, Genevieve Johnsson, if you join with the rest of the members of the collaborative in thanking you again, Genevieve, for a fabulous presentation, and thank you everyone for attending today's session.